If you guys want the cheapest gaming PC possible and you want to play Age of Empires 4 on PC, then you have come to the right place. Today we're going to be building a used gaming PC that's centered around this particular game released from Microsoft Studios. Now, for the minimum requirements, Microsoft states that you need a 4-core, 4-threaded, 6th gen i5-6300U or a Ryzen 2400G. But then after that, in small print, they say that you need a CPU that supports AVX instruction sets. Now, the AVX instruction sets were introduced to CPUs from 2011 in the form of Sandy Bridge on Intel's 2nd gen. Think a CPU like an i7-2600 for example, and then on AMD's side with the FX Bulldozer CPUs, think a CPU like an FX 6100 or an FX 8100. So these CPUs, even though they're old, will still play Age of Empires 4. So for the build that we're going with today, we've got a build that comes in at $224. Now, the majority of these parts are used parts, and in fact, the motherboard, I pulled this out of a dumpster, and this is where you can get so much value when it comes to PC gaming. If you find either cheap used parts or free used parts, you can make them work in your favor. Then for the CPU, we're going with the i7-4770, 4 cores, 8 threads, and still extremely relevant in today's modern titles where it supports AVX2. That's a generation above what Age of Empires 4 requires. Then for the graphics card, we've got an HD 7970 3GB. This was the first generation of graphics cards from AMD that officially supported DX12. And actually, even to this date, I'm pretty sure that this graphics card will be able to give you a good experience in Age of Empires 4, though we will find out a little bit later. However, since the core components of today's build are all used components, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a quick clean down, change the thermal paste on the graphics card for example, and then also clean up the motherboard and give this the best chance it has of working before we try to turn it on. And then if we get it working, we're then going to put the build together. Let's get that B-roll and music crack-a-lackin'. And now we have everything officially working fine on this build. So it's finally time to put it together and then of course, install Age of Empires 4. And there we have it with Age of Empires 4 and this budget gaming PC right behind me. I was just so impressed with what this thing could pull off. Now, I did play 2 games. However, the first game I played, it was a map on water where you have to build up a navy. And unfortunately, even though I turned VSync off in the first game that I played, it was still enabled because we're in borderless window mode. So I wanted to turn that off, and in order to do that, truly turn it off, I had to go to exclusive full screen mode. And when we did this, we then unlocked unlimited FPS, and at 1080p at low settings, 100% screen resolution, we were getting over 120 average FPS throughout the whole game. Not just at the start, even when we're in a battle towards the end of the game, we were getting very smooth FPS. The 1% and 0.1% lows also impressed me a lot on this gaming PC. Now, for the HD 7973GB, that is a phenomenal card. It's actually probably one of the best value graphics cards you can get if you want to play Age of Empires. So do keep that in mind. If you are looking to build a PC just to play Age, then this is definitely going to deliver. And the funny thing about this game is I've already had people asking me for dedicated builds to build up for them on the cheap for this particular game. So for me personally, I'm absolutely loving Age of Empires 4. For me, it's one of the best games that's been released in a long time. That's because I love RTS and I'm a big fan of the genre, and I think Age of Empires 4 delivers so hard, and it's already got pretty good balance out of the gate. Some would say the French are too strong, but if you're getting into the game, I would recommend actually starting off with the French because they're very beginner friendly. And just as they've got strong early game, as you saw with the cavalry and some of the B-roll footage I put up, they've also got very strong late game as well. So very cool race to get into. I'm definitely still in the beginner phase. I haven't spent a whole lot of time on Age of Empires 4, but I used to play Age of Empires 2 and 3 back in the day. So I'm quite familiar with the mechanics of the game. Though back to this build right behind me, the temperatures and noise were very good. The temperatures in this case were in a 25-degree ambient environment, and the graphics card was under 70 degrees the whole time, and also the CPU was traveling under 70 degrees the whole time too. So in other words, this PC is going to be absolutely fine even during the heat of summer. Now, I did use 2 new components in today's build, and that was a case as well as a power supply. So for the case, generally when I'm building a lot of different PCs, regardless of the budget, I always try to put in an RGB case. That's simply because I usually resell my builds after I'm finished with them and make a little bit of profit. And for the power supply, if I don't have any quality used power supplies on hand, I'll then use a new power supply. And in this case, we had the Gamdius 500 watt power supply, which was doing a pretty good job from what I could see. And the max power consumption we got out of the build was around 285 watts. And this was also during a Firestrike combined benchmark, which stresses the CPU and the GPU. And impressively enough, we got 55 watts on idle. So this build here does deliver pretty well when it comes to even 2021 gaming, and it also does do pretty decent when it comes to power savings, believe it or not. But the final thing to talk about is that Firestrike Extreme score. I'm going to pull this up on the screen for you guys, where if you're building a budget PC, you can then compare your score to mine, where we got a graphics score here of over 4,000, a physics score of over 10,000, and then you can relate that to the budget that we paid here today, which is $224 US. So if you can come under that budget, you are getting one of the best value gaming PCs to this date. If you're going over that, then you're still going to be getting good value, but I wouldn't try to spend a whole lot if you were going used, where for instance, if you had a graphics score of 2,000, physics score of 5,000, but you're spending about $500 on that PC, I'd say you weren't getting a good deal. So basically with the Firestrike Extreme score, I want to put that in pretty much every build I do and comparison. That way you guys have a baseline to compare your systems to and also your value to. Anyhow, with that aside, I hope you guys enjoyed today's Age of Empires 4 gaming PC. I had a lot of fun building this thing, and the game itself really makes me happy. It's bringing a smile to my face when, unfortunately, in 2021, there's not many smiles that have been brought to my face, but this game is definitely a winner. I'd recommend playing it if you haven't checked it out already, and I actually purchased it on Steam. It was around 65 Aussie dollars, so you should be able to get it for around 45 US dollars. And the good thing about Steam is it's actually a much smaller install than it is on the Microsoft Store. For some reason on Microsoft Store, it's like over 90 gigabytes. And then on Steam, it's like 34 gigabytes. And another good thing about Steam is you can transfer it from another PC to another PC and you won't have to re-download the game again. So I wish Microsoft would fix that on their Xbox Game Pass app on PC. Anyhow, guys, with that aside, I'm gonna get on out of here. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to hit that like button and also let us know in the comments section below, what do you think of today's gaming PC? And also, let us know what you think of Age of Empires 4, and if you are playing this game, what race are you playing? Love reading your thoughts and opinions. As always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Glenn Heron, and they ask, question, was your 5800X Cinebench result with hardware info open, and was the 5800X overclocked? Why I'm asking that's lower than my results with the same CPU. So when I do Cinebench results on CPUs, especially in CPU comparisons, I don't overclock the CPUs. And the reason for that is because a lot of people buy these CPUs and then just install them into their PCs. They might lock in XMP profiles, and I definitely recommend locking in XMP profiles, and then they just play games or do whatever productivity they do. And the thing about the CPU out of the box, and also about the XMP profiles, is they are guaranteed speeds. If I'm overclocking the CPU, it's then not guaranteed. So that's why I don't really like to include overclocked results. And if anything, I will talk about the sample I had and how well it overclocks, but I won't make the whole review about an overclocked CPU versus a standard bunch of CPUs. Hope that answers that question, and with that aside, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. If you stayed this far and you're enjoying that tech, yes, content, be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell, and I'll see you next time. Peace out for now. Bye.
We are going to have to act if we want to live in a different world.